Hello, class. I'm going to show you how to set up a file, specifically an air file, so we can test all those gestures and get them on the TouchSmart. With any project, you first want to set up your folder system on your hard drive. You can just set it up folder by folder, or you can download this little Apple script called Dev Project. That'll do it for you. So I'm going to name this air test. You want to name that something that makes more sense to your project. So I'm going to name my script folder 2. Okay, and so I've got source, deploy, assets, archive. Your source is where your FLA goes, and your scripts. Deploy is where we'll point our air app and our Swift to parse to, so that's where we'll publish to, I mean. Assets is where we'll put all our graphics and things like that, and of course we'll archive our source consistently to have backups. So let's open up Flash. Now we're in Flash, and if you have this dialog box, or you can get it by going File, New, we want to create a new air app, and it should look exactly like Flash. For your project, it needs to be a little bigger. I'm going to go ahead and make the frame rate 60, and that should make things look a little smoother. But instead of the full def, I'm going to make it the 720 def, but yours is going to be full def, so it'll fit on the video screen here. So I've set up just my basic properties. I want to have a document class for this, so we'll just type in a name, and if you remember, probably not, we're going to save our Flash here. Probably should do that. And then all of our scripts for this particular application will go in this air test folder in the COM folder. Any other external classes like that green stock class, the font stock class, you put it in this COM folder. So let's go ahead and save this first in the source so it'll work. So there's my air test file. Call this air test. So once again, we'll say com air test, and then .dc for document class or main timeline or whatever you want to name it. Okay, we'll click that, and then it'll create a new script for us, and we'll save that in the right folder. So com air test dc. We'll save that. So let's go ahead and put a trace in the constructing function, just to make sure that everything is kosher. Before I publish this, I want to make sure that it ends up in the deploy folder. So I'm going to go publish settings, and then here, let's go ahead and select the deploy folder. And notice it put the relative path in there for us. So, and it says working up here, so it looks like it's working. Let's check our deal here, deploy. There's our air test. Good show. You should also notice a little XML file, and that's part of Air's syntax. It uses an XML file, and you can pass data like what icons to use, etc. That gets held in that XML file. So don't delete that file, that's important. Okay, back to Flash. Now we need to set up some Air specific settings. Right now we're shooting for Air 2.6 as it's the latest one. If you're in CS5, then you'll have to be Air 2.5, I believe. But in the lab, let's go ahead and just do 2.6. I think that's going to be best. Let's click this little wrench here on the properties panel. And it's already put in the name of the files and things like that. We want to make sure, once again, we deploy this in the deploy folder. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to want to do the relative path. It won't accept the relative path, so you're just going to have to use the absolute path. And of course, if you switch computers, that path's going to change. You have to reestablish that on a different computer. So when you're testing, when it's published, it shouldn't be a problem. This signature is where you'll need to have a little certificate. That's kind of an authentication process as you are developing the application. They're going to want to know who you are, and eventually you can submit that certificate to be kind of approved. So when people download your stuff, they don't think you're creating a virus or something like that. Apple has something very, very similar for iPhone development, except it's way locked down. You can't test, or you can't create one without the certificate. So here you can just create one. So let's go ahead and make a new one so you can see that. So you put your name. I'm in art and design. I guess you'd be student. Maryville University. Password, go ahead and type one that you're going to remember. Something benign. I just put test in mine. And then you'll go ahead and save this. Once again, this is an absolute path. So if you test on a different computer, you're going to have to reestablish the certificate's location or create a new one. It's kind of a pain, but it's really no big deal. You just create a new one. So it's creating one. It's called air test. You have to type in that password and say remember password for this session. Once that's done, let's go ahead and set up some icons. I did mine fairly quickly, but each icon should look good at each phase. 128 pixels, 48 pixels, 32 pixels, and 16 pixels. Those files should be PNG files, and you should put those in your assets folder. Okay, so those are here under assets. I went ahead and moved those over. And then here's 128 PNG, 48, 32, and 16. So those should all be created. And once you zoom down, you should notice that the type, etc., needs to be adjusted at each phase. So you should have essentially a system for creating a good version of each pixel range. Here you just tell it where those are located. And once they're there, they're there. So that's 16. Okay. It says this needs to be copied to a folder, so we'll say OK. Let's say OK here. And then if you look in your deploy, it'll create a new folder called Applications for Publishing Test Icon 16. So it'll put all of those in there, and you want to put all your icons. You don't have to have them ready at this stage. You can create them later, republish, and then it would include the icons at a later time. Once that's set up, everything should be pretty hunky-dory. You can test, and since it's air, you can make it full screen just like it should be. You can test all the gestures at this point. So it's necessary for our purpose. Once that's done, you want to test it on, say, our Touch Smart. You can go to Publish Settings and say Publish, and it'll create all the necessary little folders, and that should show up in your deploy. It's right here. So this is the loader, something you would download, just like just like any application. You would download this or give it to somebody on a desk, and then this would automate the entire loading process for this application. So it's called Air Test. I'm going to double click this just like a user would, and it's saying that I'm an unknown publisher. So once again, you're going to, professionally, you'd want to register it so you'd be a known publisher. People wouldn't be frightened to load your applications. We're going to go ahead and load it in the applications folder. In your case, you might want to experiment with loading it, say, in your student folder because you don't have access to load in the applications folder. I don't think that's going to be a problem, but we'll have to play that by ear. Okay, so it makes us test SWIF, and we should see it in our applications folder. There it says air test, and notice the icon. There's the 128, there's the 16. Also notice that the 16 you can hardly see, but you know, Adobe's are nice and visible and viewable. So you'll want to make sure that you kind of follow the example that they have given for those smaller icons. Essentially, that's it. This should operate and work just like a Flash SWIF, except it's standalone and it acts like just an application. So that's how you get started with Air.